Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the ranking member, the witnesses for appearing, and I'd also like to thank the staff. I do so because it is said that great people always rise to the occasion, but the greater people make the occasion, and the staff literally helps make these occasions. They're the greater people, so I thank them. I would like to share a thought that is rarely expressed. When these horrible acts occur, Black people cringe because the first thing that comes through their minds is this: was the assailant Black? We really have suffered so much for so long that this issue plagues us. And it's my opinion that regardless of the race of the person, all people who perform these dastardly deeds based on hate have to be condemned. Doesn't matter what your organization is, how you got started. Maybe your intentions were honorable initially, but they're not now. We have to condemn it because it's hate. And those who tolerate hate perpetuate hate. Hate has to be dealt with from the top. The tone and tenor is set at the top. Mr. Deputy Commissioner, do you agree with the premise that the tone and tenor in your organization is set at the top?
I believe that all organizations are in some manner a reflection of their leadership, yes.
Thank you. And I'm confident that not one of you would agree that there were very fine people among the bigots at Charlottesville. I don't believe one of you would agree. If you do agree that there were some fine people, kindly extend a hand into the air. Let the record reflect that not one hand is in the air. No fine people among those neo-Nazis, white supremacists. The tone and tenor is set at the top. The Chief Executive Officer of the United States of America. Fine people. In Charlottesville, where a woman lost her life to hate. We cannot allow ourselves to tolerate hate from any source. We have to have the courage, the intestinal fortitude to stand against it, regardless as to the source. It's ironic that the president is cutting these grants, and some of the acrimony that we're experiencing is exacerbated by his commentary as whole countries in Africa. This commentary at the top sets a tone and tenor that's unacceptable. My hope is that we can change this. Mr. Bishop, I agree with you. Your city ought not have been cut out of this loop. It should not have been. I don't know what I can do to help you, but I will. This is not a partisan issue. Shouldn't happen. Republican National Convention is going there. I want Republicans protected. After all, I have to have someone to argue with. So I want to help, but I want to make this final comment. We have a bill that passed the House, 290 bipartisan support, was on the suspension calendar, 290, 118, 294, 118 against. This bill streamlines the CDBG-DR process so that you don't have to always start at the top and have the money trickle down to various municipalities. It provides those with accounting departments that can handle large sums of money the opportunity to receive some direct funding. It's a very important piece of legislation. It has passed the House. Our challenge now is to get it through the Senate. Bipartisan ought not be held up. So we have a job to do. I respect you and I support your position. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, sir. Let's see, I now recognize Mr. Crenshaw's gone. Let me follow up. Also, Mr. Kearse, I've been advised that FEMA lowered New Jersey's risk ranking. Can you discuss the impact of this concerning information?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We recently learned that our risk ranking dropped from 7 to 9. Obviously, with the top 11 UASIs in the United States, this is problematic. One of the things that we were told in a recent conference call is that DHS is not including intelligence gathering information from the FBI and will not be done so until 2021. Another thing that's quite vibrant in New Jersey, we have what they call SARS reports, which is basically special suspicious activity reports, which are funneled through the local police officers on a state, county, and local level. And they're sent down to our regional fusion center down with the state police in the Rock. If those reports are, and obviously they're sent to the FBI, if those reports are not being included in the analysis by DHS, that's problematic in itself. The other thing is how they account for extremist groups that are residing within the UASI region. There again, with not gleaning this information. The other problem that we have too, it appears that they're not collecting information from the bomb data center, which is another good way to determine where we see additional domestic terrorism incidents. And another problem that we saw was that there's an issue with prosecutions only being counted based on the location of the prosecution on the federal level. And I think last and probably the most important is apparently there was no data call done by DHS in 2019. And what data calls do, it allows what we have risk mitigation planners in each one of our 7 UASI counties to share that information. For instance, one of the things that I found quite troubling, they published a list of major events that's impacting our UASI region. Jersey City was listed for 4 events, when in fact our documentation proves that we have over 260 major events in 2019 that had at least 1,000 people in attendance. I don't know what the answer is. I think that they have to take a serious look at how they're currently rated. These ratings are being analyzed and presented. And there again, my feeling is that if our rating is lowered, there's a potential that they would lower our funding.
Well, thank you, and we'll definitely have to pose that question to FEMA on how they create that criteria, which, I know in North Carolina, sir, with Charlotte being just totally excluded, it just makes no sense that's the case. But these are issues that we want to raise with FEMA, so we thank you for putting them on the record.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller, just for the record, can you give us the total number of NYPD, both civilian and police officers who are involved in counterterrorism intel units, what the total is? They're working every day on this issue?
So the total number of the people who do this full-time in the NYPD for a living every day is around 2,000. When you consider 700 and some odd in intelligence, an equal number, slightly larger in counterterrorism, then the force at the JTTF, then the forces that we task every day from SRG. But I think when you see a crisis like this, we also press a button, and with the advantageous, funded with DHS funding, our smartphones can make 36,000 NYPD officers, counterterrorism officers. That means sending out that license plate, sending out that picture, sending out that alert, and we're prepared to do that on a regular basis.
Okay. Also, I would just add, and I said this to Yvette Clark, who's a good friend, this committee has worked better when it's bipartisan, and I agree with you. I criticize the Trump administration for the grant funds, but this goes back to the start. Even in the last years with the Bush administration, they were cutting Homeland Security funds. On every year of the Obama administration, they were cutting it. I think the problem we have here is administrations look upon this as a budget issue. They look at it as being static. Now, when this committee was formed, when the Department of Homeland Security was formed, we were talking about Islamist terrorism coming from overseas. We didn't anticipate neo-Nazis, white supremacists, black Israelites. We didn't count on massive gun attacks. So all this is added. Unfortunately, the budgets, also we weren't counting on all of these climate issues, the flooding. So the budget, even if it stays static, is actually being decreased. I certainly concur with Mr. Bishop. It makes no sense in the year when the National Convention is coming to Charlotte, in addition to everything else, to take them off the IWASI list. So what they try to do, in fairness to DHS, is work within a budget, but it's a budget that was basically established in 2002 or 2003. And so we're trying to make everything fit into that budget. I think we have to expand the size of the budget. We have to realize that we have now problems we didn't anticipate then. Then it was just Islamist terrorism. Now Iran is much more of an issue, and not just under President Trump. These arrests are going back during the Obama administration of sleeper cells in New York. And again, the shootings are going on, the attacks on churches. That was minimal back in 2001, 2002, and now it's fallen under the jurisdiction of Homeland Security. So I think we should really try to make a bipartisan effort and a region, and not just keep this regional Northeast versus the South or anything else, realize that every area of the country has increased issues, increased problems that come under the scope of Homeland Security, and that we have to find a way to make a bipartisan pressure, not just to fight every year to put the money back in the budget to maintain it, but to increase it. Be out front in saying that, because otherwise we're on defense, whether it's Obama or Trump. They send us a budget with massive cuts, and we think we're heroes because we restore the money. Well, the fact is restoring the money is still a cut, and that's the reality. So I think we should get started early on in every budget year and saying that that money has to be increased. This is not the same as, this is just not some green eye shade accounting issue. We're talking about life and death here. And none of us wants to go through another 9/11. None of us wants to go through the massive hurricanes and storms that have hit. Nobody wants another temple shooting. Nobody wants another church attack. And to have all of this going on, and we're just trying to live within the small budget. It is small in comparison to overall, and yet the cost in human life. I mean, now we're very concerned about anti-Semitism because of the last several months and over the last several years. It could be something else coming up. We have to make sure that the police and all of the organizations have the funding they need. And so, again, I'm saying this, being critical of the Trump administration, as I was very critical of the Obama administration and the Bush administration in the last several years. This is not an accounting issue. It's a life and death issue, and we have to face up to it. That I yield back.
Thank you, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I was critical of the Obama administration too at the time of the cuts, and I don't know how the formulas are made for this, and that's something that we really have to get to the bottom of, how the criteria is subjective or not. The linkage between New York and Jersey City and Newark. I'll give you two examples that I'm not proud of. The original bombing of the World Trade Center in the lower, when they tried to go low, those terrorists were living in Maplewood, New Jersey, until they did that. The Chelsea bomber ended up running to Linden, New Jersey, after he did his bombing. So these areas are so interconnected, and somehow we have to get the department to understand the connectivity of this in order to make sure that the funding stays robust for the entire nation. And with that, I will...
Chairman, yield this one moment?
Yes.
I think Mr. Miller would agree also that when you make these arrests in New York, you get intel that affects the whole country.
So I could not agree more. And I think if you look at the geography of it, the first World Trade Center bomb was built in Jersey City. The 9/11 hijackers did flight training in New Jersey while living in Patterson. The individual who ran over people on the West Side Highway was living in Patterson, New Jersey. The Times Square truck bomber, Faisal Shahzad, was from Connecticut. The white nationalist groups that are extending in Western New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and other places are all a factor in this. New York City will fight for its share of the pot. I'm sure we'll do fine. But it's not about taking money from Jersey City or Charlotte. It's what you gentlemen just pointed out. Formula aside, the core here is the pot needs to be bigger for the country. The Pittsburgh attack, as you mentioned, and others are telling us that this is an issue that is spreading. Sure, New York is the top target, but there's nowhere, as we are learning, week by week, that is not a target.
Also, without mentioning names, I'm sure you've come up with other cities where there's a real threat from Hezbollah that are far away from New York City.
We have often said, and I said this recently to our briefing prior to the Soleimani incident, our briefing with the Vice President of the United States at police headquarters, that events in places like Iran can change very rapidly over a period of week or 10 days that can change the geopolitical threat picture vis-a-vis a well-funded state actor, and that we have to be prepared to ramp up to that. These are real factors that have just demonstrated themselves beyond theory.
And see the circumstances, that we fortify in New Jersey and New York, these actors are going to look for points of weakness where they can attack. So it's naturally going to permeate the entire nation. With that, Mr. Rose, if you like another. Oh, the gentlelady from Illinois is here. Where you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Payne. As we know, one of the Department of Homeland Security's most important tools for securing community organizations is the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, the NSGP. These grants help first responders, schools, nonprofits, including houses of worship, defend against terror attacks, and these grants are in high demand. And I'm so pleased that we just enacted a significant increase in their funding, in large part thanks to Chairman Thompson's advocacy. Critically, this additional funding is dedicated to suburban and rural communities like mine in Northern Illinois. Communities like mine face a real resource gap in defending against threats of terrorism, and I'm working on legislation to address that. So first to Mr. Masters, Mr. Sprayberry, and Mr. Kears, when it comes to outreach and engagement with suburban and rural communities, what do you think DHS is doing right, and where are potential areas for improvement?
I think broadly the enactment of the increases in funding, thanks to the members of this subcommittee and certainly led by Chairman Payne and Ranking Member King, has been instrumental. And they are providing guidance and technical support to effectuate those grants. We also know that the need far outweighs even the increase. Where things have been strong, I think that we have seen great support from the protective security advisors across the country. That said, we believe that there needs to be enhanced resourcing to DHS to allow for more protective security advisors. They are overtasked and under-resourced.
100%.
I also believe that information sharing, which is often done through a complex network engaging the DHS-funded fusion centers, state, local, and federal law enforcement, is good.